In the last video, we hooked up these two field components to the new render input function. Anytime that the field component called render input, it also passed in a set of properties that we took and passed along to the text input inside of here. So remember, the running theme with Redux form is that it's going to do all this stuff for us automatically, and it's up to us just to wire up this last little step right here, to take whatever handlers or values that are provided by Redux form and make sure that we actually wire them up to some meaningful input. Now in this video, we're going to continue working on our render input function right here. So at present, we have our input with ... input. When that shows up on the screen, we get this really ugly input right here. Like there's no label on there, the two inputs are right next to each other, and it's really tough for a user to figure out what's going on. So rather than just returning a text input right here, we can actually return an entire blob of JSX. So like a couple of different elements. We are not restricted to just returning the one single input by itself. So I'm going to again turn this into a multi-line expression. Sorry for going back and forth. Remember to clean up the semicolon on the right-hand side of the input. And then I'm going to wrap this with a div that has a class name of field. And then above it, I'm going to put in a label tag because we probably want to tell the user what actual input this represents. Now remember, the render input function is going to be called two times. One time by our field for title and one time by our field for description. So when we put our label inside of here, we need to make sure that we know which field we are currently going to be working on. So to get that appropriate field, we can add on, or the appropriate title of the field, I should say, we can add on an additional prop to both of these field elements. So on the first field, I'm going to add on a prop of label. And for this first one, I'll put in enter title. And then on the second one, I'll put in a label of enter description, like so. Anytime that we add in some props to our field components right here, Redux form is going to see that we have passed in some prop that it doesn't know what to do with. In other words, that field element has no idea what to do with a label prop. So the field element by default is just going to take that prop and pass it through to the render input function. So this is how we can customize the render input function whenever it gets called. We can just add on additional props to the field element. So now, because we passed in this prop that the field component doesn't know about, it's going to be passed into render input, and we can receive that as an additional property on that first argument. So I can now reference this label property and destructure it out of that object. That gets passed in as the first argument. And now inside my label right here, I can print up label, like so. So now I'll save this, and we'll flip back over, and now we can see that we correctly get our label appearing on the screen. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now, I say that it looks pretty good, but it doesn't really look perfect. We really don't want the text to be right next to each input. So to fix that up, we can just add on a quick class name to our form element right here. So I'm going to put on a class name of UI form, like so. And then once I do that, I'll see the nice form appear. That looks a lot better right there. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. So now we have the ability to show the form and all the different fields that we want, and we could put in some title and description inside of here. So now the last thing we need to start to think about is how we can submit this form and get some callback that says, hey, the form was just submitted, so that you and I can try to create a new stream or whatever it is we are trying to do. So let's start to figure that out in the next video.